In 1964, I was stationed in the Army in Fort Riley, Kansas, which is located right about in the center of the state.
Mm-hmm.
On the night of December 10th, 1964, or the morning of the 10th, I had a regular guard duty assignment guarding the motor pool in an area of the fort. Fort Riley is broken down into like 5 sections: Camp Funston, Main Post, Camp Forsyth. And anyway, on this particular night, I was guarding a section of the motor pool in Camp Forsyth. Guard duty was 2 hours on, 4 hours off. Around 1 a.m. on the morning of the 10th of December, 1964, I was to, be relieved. And a lieutenant came up to me and, brought the Jeep up into the motor pool area, got into the Jeep, and he started driving away from the barracks where the guards slept. And we started going into the back roads of the Fort Riley area. I estimated we drove maybe for about 20, 25 minutes or so, and he told me to get out of the Jeep. I went to this truck, and standing behind the truck were 2 other enlisted men, Specialist 4th Class, and another PFC, and also a number of officers. And I have to backtrack here for a few seconds. On regular guard duty in Fort Riley, Kansas, we were only given 3 rounds of ammunition. That's all, 7.62 NATO rounds for the M14 that was used at that time. We were given a full clip of ammunition, each one of us, from the back of this truck. And we were told that a secret aircraft from Offutt Air Force Base, which was located in Nebraska, the next state up, had become disabled, and we were to put a security net around it, and the object was top secret, or a classified object. From where this truck was, we hiked up and down about 3 or 4 hills, so that was about another 25 to 45 minutes, I'm estimating, and it was quite dark, and we really didn't know what was happening. I mean, we're half asleep, and all I wanted to do was go back to bed. All of a sudden, we heard like a thrashing sound, like a... Turned out that thrashing sound was a Huey-type helicopter with a very, very tremendous bright beam on it. You know how the police out here in the L.A. area look for criminals with a beam?
Sure do.
But it was much, much more intense, maybe 3 or 4 times brighter. Anyway, this chopper would go back and forth over this semi-flat terrain, and all of a sudden it lit up this round, disc-shaped object. And I stood back about that time. I would estimate we were maybe about 100 to 150 feet away. And I said, my God, the thing looks like a flying saucer, jokingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually we got right up to it. We walked around it. That would be about probably around an hour. Now, during this hour, the Huey helicopter would go back and forth over the field, or the terrain area there. The light would constantly be scanning the ground back and forth, would come over the top of the object, 60 to 200 feet above the object, hover over it, light it up, then fly off. This went on approximately the entire hour I was there. The craft, and this is going back quite a few number of years, the craft was about roughly, like a hamburger bun with like the meat sticking out of the middle, but it wasn't a hamburger. It was like little squares that were jutting out from it, kind of the appearance of hard rubber. For lack of a better word, it had a fin or a port on it. Below that was a round type opening, which I'm calling an exhaust port. I really don't know what it was. When you got real close to this thing, by real close I'm saying within 7 inches to maybe 25 or 30 inches, the air was definitely warmer, and you could feel that because it was very, very cold that night. Eventually a 5-ton truck came there, some radio equipment was set up, other men came around the area, and we were told to leave, that we were no longer needed there. This would put the time at around 3 a.m. in the morning. So myself and the original men that were by that deuce and a half truck were marched back to the deuce and a half truck, and we were told never to reveal or repeat what we saw there that night, because that object definitely was a secret object from Offutt Air Force Base. And to this day, going back to what I saw and photos that I have seen since that date, leads me to an awful lot of speculation that what I saw that night was not, quote, unquote, a secret object.
Hey, David?
Plus why, if that thing was paid with taxpayers' dollars in 1964, why hasn't it been revealed in 1980 or 1979?
Hello, this is Louie.
Hello, Louie.
You see, I was just wondering, your description a few minutes ago of what you saw kind of meshes with something that I saw on a very special maneuver that was conducted at Camp Ripley, Minnesota in '64, about June. I was with the National Guard out there in Wichita, Kansas, and I think it was the 32nd Division was what they called it out there. They took us all up to Camp Ripley in a great big convoy, and one moonless night out there, they had us dig in, and we were told to stay in place, that they were going to attempt to attack us. Some special assault groups were. And they were very weird, I thought, very unusual the way they gave us instructions. They told us under no circumstances were we to move. They gave us a lot of instruction in the use of visual purple and night vision training by looking out of the corner of our eyes. And they told us to notify our immediate superior even if we went to the pit latrine that they had dug out there. And after a few hours of darkness, a little after midnight, I got kind of tired of just sitting in one place. And I went back to the latrine, and then, I don't know, I guess I was kind of bored. I took my rifle, and I went for about 25 or 30 feet. And I thought I heard something. And so I just stuck down where I was. I didn't want to get in any trouble since they had given us such harsh instructions about moving. My legs had been kind of cramped earlier, and I wanted to stretch out for just a few paces and then go back to my foxhole there. But when I ducked down beside these bushes, I noticed a guy was walking very close to me that had a different kind of a uniform than I did. He had a different kind of a helmet. He had something he was holding in his hand that looked like... it looked like it was a sighting device of some type where he was able to see through the darkness better than I was. And so I followed this guy for a little while. His weapon looked different than mine. It didn't look like a submachine gun would have looked, and it was smaller. And I thought, Jesus, this is kind of an unusual guy. If he's the aggressor, there's no use in my just letting him go on, towards our communications gear. So I followed him for a little while, and I think a couple of times he was pretty well on to the fact that I was following him, but being an old country boy, he just didn't quite nail me down. Every time he turned around and looked at me, I managed to duck down and keep myself between shrubbery and him. But I followed him, I'd say for a good 300 meters, and then I noticed that his footprints, which evidently I could see a little bit in the light. There was no moon, and his footprint just kind of ended at, I would say, a tree that was about 35 feet high. And when his prints ended, I thought, oh no, I really blew it now. This guy's probably sitting right on top of me in the tree. But before I started to look up at the tree, I noticed that the air was warmer. And I noticed there was some kind of a gentle downdraft. And when I started to look up, I noticed something else that startled me almost immediately, where there had been no clouds before, and we at least had the starlight. All of a sudden I realized that there was no starlight over me. The stars were blocked out by some sort of a rather large object. And so I moved my eyes around rather quickly, to see if I could frame this thing. It was obviously a black object. And when I checked around the top of me, I noticed that it was circular. And doggone if I didn't hear a metal door slide away. And I looked up. There was a square door in the center of this thing, and I could hear sort of an electronic whining sound, one like you'd hear possibly with hydraulic equipment running, but I'm only guessing.
Lou, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
This is David. This was in Kansas now?
Well,
in Wichita. Can you remember the year? That's
I was in that National Guard unit out there that they have on, it's the one south of town there. We were in the old 32nd Division, and they moved us in a big convoy.
What town was it in, or what area, what state?
Well, they moved us up to Camp Ripley, Minnesota for this maneuver.
So this happened in Minnesota?
Yeah, this happened on a moonless night there after they had given us a bunch of training in night vision.
What year?
It was 64, I believe, June, or I believe it was about June of 64. And this object that I looked up and saw bore a very strong resemblance to the one that he said he was guarding, and that's why it kind of shocked me when I sat here and was listening to what he said. Also, the way that I noticed the warm air near it, and when I was under it, sort of a downward, very, very gentle warm air current. The only thing is that I don't know whether he was under it or not. I would say that I probably saw the same vehicle, but I was under it, and it was painted black, or was black. And but the thing about it was this square door under on the bottom side of it slid away, and then I could hear the sort of an electronic equipment sound whine. There was no motor noise at any time.
Did you see it fly away, or was that just it? It was above you?
Well, no. I fell backwards then. I was so startled by the whole thing, I fell backwards on the ground, and I was laying there with my rifle looking up at this thing. And the square door, they had red blackout lights in it. I could hear a couple of voices talking, but I couldn't really make out that much what they were saying. I would estimate that they were somewhere around, probably 38 feet or 40 feet above me. And it was a big object. I mean, it was not
What size was this being that you saw? This is Len Stringfield.
The man appeared to me to be a soldier with special equipment, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The only thing is that years later, I saw a Mechanics Illustrated story on the servo soldier, and also the old-style radio helmet, the one that was shaped differently with the antenna on the top. And when I saw those pictures of some of their experimental gear that they had in that regard, and later on when they made it plain that they had the night vision scope, it was obvious to me then that this is what the guy was carrying. But now, let me tell you what happened. I really felt like at this point I was in over my head, and I'd already violated orders by walking away from where they had me stationed. So I got the hell out of there and got back to where I was supposed to be. But the next morning, they had my whole unit up. They had us standing at attention in the sun for somewhere a little over 3 hours. They were screaming at us, wanting to know who it was that left their post, who it was that had followed this guy. They reminded us that there was classified operations taking place. We were told not to leave our post. And I don't know, the way they handled it and the way they asked their questions, it was so frightening that for 4 years I wouldn't even talk to my best buddies in the National Guard unit. I wouldn't even admit I had done it, but they narrowed it down to where they were sure that it was one of 3 of us that had followed this guy. He just looked like an average height being to me. I'm 6 foot. He seemed a little smaller, but he didn't seem small enough for me to notice. I was certain beyond the shadow of a doubt later on when, I was looking for ways to explain it. I guess everyone tries to justify what they see. Later on, I read an article about some of their secret work in quiet copters that there's been a little bit of talk about, and I thought, well, if it was a quiet copter, I could understand it, but there just wasn't any engine noise other than just a faint whine of maybe hydraulic or sound like generating gear.
I'll interrupt you just a second here. I know you don't have the time to go into a full explanation, and nor would I have time to ask a lot of questions now, but would it be possible if you could send me a report on this to my home address and your phone number, and I could be in touch with you?
I tell you, well, we have all of the information on Louie here for you, okay?
Okay.
Leonard, and I'll send it on to you.
All right. I would like to be able to be in touch with this gentleman and discuss it further. I have some questions which I wouldn't want to put over the air.
But anyway, I wanted to say one thing to you before we cut it off. It's been my firm opinion since this incident happened that, and since I saw the later on articles about this experimental military gear that was not adopted in the way of the helmet and all, and which is actually what I saw that night, this guy wearing, I have felt like that this was in the inventory, and I had felt like it was on the order of a quiet copter. But there's other things about it that just didn't quite add up. It's been a long time ago. I don't remember all the details now, I'm sure, as well as I did then, but let me tell you, the last remark that was made to me by somebody who was identified as a United States Army intelligence officer, when they had me in for... He said, "You are the one that followed that guy, aren't you?" He said, "You are the one that was over there out of position." He said, "I feel like it's you," but he said, "We really can't prove whether it's you or one of these other two guys," but he said, "Personally, I believe it is you."
Lou, is that your name?
Louie, yes.
Yeah.
Lou and Mr. Stringfield?
Yeah.
Isn't it true back a number of years ago, Donald E. Kehoe was saying that all the major corporations, Northrop, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Lockheed, and many other military-based companies had tremendous contracts, if I recall, from the government on anti-gravity devices. Isn't that true?
Yes, they were all working at it, but we had been unable to learn how successful.
It was kind of interesting listening to Louie's case.
And that goes back many back in the 50s. But again, whatever they've come up with, of course, would remain top secret. And
can I make a remark that might
there's
be...
no question that we have been trying to develop a replica of this, of the prototype, the original, the extraterrestrial device.
I tell you what, time's getting away from us here just a little bit.
All right.
Louie, I'm going to pass your telephone number and things along to Mr. Stringfield, and he can talk to you more, off the air about this. Would that be all right?
Yeah, can I make one last quick remark to you there?
Yeah,
I worked over at Pacific Air Motive at the Hollywood Burbank Air Terminal, and a number of times there I saw vertical takeoff planes leave, and they always kind of did it on a moonless night, when it was dark. Sometimes the only thing you'd see would just be one nav light on. But one night there, I noticed on one of their vertical takeoff planes when I was in my car at the parking lot at Pacific Air Motive, I noticed leaving from one of the Lockheed buildings, one of their vertical takeoff planes took off almost without noise. Very similar to the sound that this thing made. And I just, when it didn't get very high at all until it was just almost inaudible. And I really kind of suspect that this is something that they had a few prototypes in the inventory of. I really believe that this guy that saw this thing on guard probably saw about the same thing I did, and I do believe when they told him it was something in the inventory, I think it was. Especially now that I've heard somebody else see something like I did. It's been many years, and all I've ever been is laughed at for the story and kidded about the super soldier, and I really believe now that you are talking about something that was in the inventory at one time.
That's a very interesting point, and we appreciate that much, Louie. And Leonard will get in touch with you and go into further detail with a little later, okay?
All righty, bye-bye.
Thank you very much for calling. KABC time is 22 minutes of midnight.